So we are looking at fitness assessments today. Obviously, fitness assessments a huge part of what we do. We are going to be covering both subjective and objective information today. I don't know why NASM always puts such a huge emphasis on understanding the difference between these two, but it is one of those definitions that does tend to pop up every now and then. And it's like, what's the difference between subjective and objective information? So we'll be talking a little bit about that. But then like the very important stuff that again, like a trainer who can do like a really solid fitness assessment is usually a very financially successful trainer with a lot of clients. We want to be able to like communicate about like what we find in these assessments, what that means to our clients, like what it's going to mean for our workouts and how we're going to use that to create an individualized plan and stuff. And then that will allow us to gain insight into our clients like medical history and stuff. Obviously, you know, everybody's going to have like a slightly different medical background, and it's going to have certain implications depending on like, you know, what's going on with that individual. We want to know a little bit about their physical activity and dietary habits, especially in the weight loss side of things. You know, I love asking like a lot of like personal questions that don't necessarily directly have anything to do with like diet and exercise. I just like to ask, you know, learning the answers to those questions sometimes gives you insight into like somebody's lifestyle, you know. Like it's always very interesting how like things will change between like the assessment and like your first couple sessions. Like you'll have an assessment, right? You'll be training a client, and then it'll be like, you know, 2, 3, 4 weeks in, and it just never came up in conversation. But you're like looking at your client's statistics, and you're like, yeah, you know what, you're not quite losing weight at the rate we thought, you know. And it's like, I wonder why this. I wonder what's going on with the math here. You know what I mean? Like, what's going on with these numbers? We calculated out your calories. We tried to get you on a plan that's going to work, and we get you a physical activity program. This should be resulting in about a half a pound to 1 pound a week. Trying to figure it out, right? And then your client's like, yeah, I don't know. You know, I have been a little less physically active. I lost my job like 3 months ago. And it's like, you told me that you were a construction worker, you know, like, or something like really physically active. You told me like you painted houses for a living. You told me, you know, something like physically very demanding. And so it's like when we were choosing our activity factor to multiply our calories by, we put like somebody who's going to exercise. They're, you know, they've been doing all the homework, right? They did all the things that, but they just forgot to mention it. You know, like it slipped their mind. Happens to me constantly. And like, you know, it's like it's so funny because there's always like some small reason behind in the background there. So, you know, figuring out doing a fitness assessment and like bringing that data in and bringing that information in is such a hugely valuable part of like the entire training process. Because if you've got really good data to work from, you can write really good, very effective programs, you know. And even general like likes and dislikes, that's also a really good one, you know. Like I try to pay attention to my clients' likes and dislikes. If they're like, I don't like doing this type of exercise, I love this, I try to incorporate what they like, I try to avoid what they dislike. Now everyone's going to tell you they dislike, you know, things like burpees or cardio or whatever, right? Some stuff is unavoidable, but if you know that those are the types of things that your client really does dislike, finding a way to make it kind of fun is going to be the priority, you know. So we can gather all that information on our very first time meeting a client. You know, we can gather all that information during our fitness assessment. Often what is going to happen is a person is going to come to the gym. They are going to get signed up for their membership, right? And then they're going to get a 1 hour fitness assessment or a 1 hour training session, whatever you want to call it, right? And so that 1 hour is the time you have to make a good enough first impression to actually sell someone a 6 session, 12 session, 24, whatever, however many sessions package. You know, like the idea is that you're trying to get somebody so stoked about hiring a personal trainer. You know, now most of your sales, if I'm being perfectly honest, are usually like people who have already considered doing this before they walked into the gym. You know, like They are going to the gym to get a membership so that they can get paired up with a personal trainer. So all you have to do is just be the biggest trainer in the room, you know, the one who sort of matches with what they need the most. But if you can get like a substantial amount of like individual little single sessions or like small sale packages and little tiny ones that are coming from the people who, you know, they come to the gym, they're just there to have access to a treadmill regularly, right? They just want to have like access to the treadmill, maybe use the pool every now and then, and the juice bar. You know what I mean? Like they're not interested in like hitting the weight room. They're not really interested in working with a personal trainer, but they get their 1 hour assessment. They're like, you know what, I'll go for you know, I'll go for the giggles, you know, like they're like, let's go figure out what it's like. And then you absolutely nail it, lay out their information, and, you know, really help this person out. They're going to be stoked. They're going to completely change their mind and absolutely want to work with you, you know? So that's, again, like I've had that happen plenty of times. I had a girl, who did not at all want, all she wanted was just access, like access to the weight room and stuff. She didn't even want to do the free fitness assessment. So like my gym had a slightly different process. They also had like the trainers give tours because we had this equipment. We had the techno gym equipment. I don't know if I've shown you guys that before. It's in videos every now and then, which was like really annoying to use if you don't like get schooled on how to use it. And so like we had to block an hour or two off in our schedule every week. So I had like I was the new guy. So I had 2 blocks that I wasn't allowed to train. I had to only be there to give these tours. And I got paid like minimum wage in that hour, you know, like, and I'm grateful for it because that's where I set up my fitness assessments with these clients, right? So I give them the tour and that'd be like a group and I'd be like, all right, all 5 of you, you're brand new, obviously, you know, that's why we just did the tour. Let's do our fitness assessments. I'd set them up. This one girl did not even want to do that. She was like, nope, I got what I wanted. I know how to use the treadmill. And I was like, oh no, it's really informative. I promise you're going to have a really good time. It's not going to make you uncomfortable, this and that. Because I think she was really uncomfortable. She was very, 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 very nervous. She had a very bad relationship with exercise. And so I was like, I promise, and you know, and this other guy that just happened to be on the tour, he's like, yeah, you got to do it. It's great. And he was like, why don't you do it with me? And he's like, we'll do it together. It'll be awesome. And he was really nice. And so I was like, yeah, we don't normally do that, but okay, yeah. Did the fitness assessment. And then that girl got so stoked, she bought a very small package of like 6 sessions. We burned through them. She was getting the results she wanted after that first couple sessions. She was enjoying the whole training process. And then she approached her boss, who was also a member at that gym. And the 2 of them bought duo sessions. And I trained both of them for like, I think it was the biggest session they offered. I think it was 48 sessions each. So I ended up selling 2 48 session packages in these like duo sessions, which meant that I was getting paid not quite like double, you know, because like they get a big discount for training together. But it was like a very substantial, it was a much better hourly rate for me. It was really helpful for them. And that girl ended up getting so motivated and super into it. She became a Pilates instructor and I mean, honestly, she's still actually like a nursing administrator. Like she makes really good money. But she got so into it to keep herself motivated. She became a Pilates instructor and now she teaches Pilates at that gym I used to work at. Or at least the last time I checked in on her, which was actually a couple of years ago. But so that is what a fitness assessment can do for you guys. Like I'm going to be talking about assessments today, but I want you to remember that this is your best tool in your sales toolbox as well. Anybody have any questions before we get started on like what I mean by fitness assessments, or anybody stoked about this? I know some of you guys have been through it before, so I'm hoping you guys are stoked to go back through it again.
I will say though, with the fitness assessments, people always saw it like at EOS Fitness, they always saw it as like a trap. They didn't want to speak to the fitness manager because they didn't want to be sold on any type of packages. And so we would have to, after they got signed up for their membership, we would kind of have to fib and call them and say, hey, when you pick up your floppy or whatever to get you into the gym, we need you to stop by so we can do your assessment. So we just made them assume it was part of what they needed to do.
Oh, wow.
Rather than like, hey, come and take this for free. They'd be like, no, thanks.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. People, I mean, I will brush off a salesperson if I get any inkling that they're trying to sell me something. I do the same thing, you know? So I get that. I will say there are times where one of my favorite things to do is be very cavalier about the fact that I'm going to try to sell them a membership. And I think I said this, last week, but I was like, all right, so what we're going to do today is I'm going to walk you through, give you a posture analysis, figure out like sort of what's going on, and then we're going to build you a program. And then I'm going to take you back here and I'm going to try and sell you a membership. And that is a, very incredibly not sneaky thing to do, but I think people sometimes appreciated it because it was very, very, very transparent. And it comes off as like a little brazen, but it also comes off as like, look, there's no sneakiness going on here. Like I'm nothing if not honest, So I think that is a way to sort of retool that sometimes. Once you've got the appointment booked. I don't think that would work in the initial part of it. But like once the appointment's booked, once they're there for the appointment, I think that can be a really sort of good line. All right, so subjective information. So the first thing we're going to start with when we go through like a fitness assessment, I'm actually going to download this from NASM's website. So if you go to nasm.org, if you actually go to nasm.org, and don't click the wrong button, and you go over here and you go to like their fitness tools section or the trainer resources section, go down to downloads here, right? And this has some other stuff too. This has like a calorie calculator, BMI calculator. This has like the 1 rep max calculator. Remember we were talking about like calculating that can be a pain in the butt sometimes. I do think do it on the app. I do think that like going to this website and clicking these calculators can be kind of a pain, but you go to downloads. And right in here, there are also like free mini courses. For those of you that are new, there are some really good courses here. But then we've got little calculators, but those are the ones we already opened up. And then down here under assessment forms, right, we have all of these like little downloadable forms. So we've got the PAR-Q, which I want to put that there. We've got the general medical / lifestyle history questionnaire. I want these all on one freaking thing. Otherwise, I'm gonna have a million windows open. We've got our body composition assessments, which, like I said, are going to be very relevant for our weight loss clients. And then let's get the posture and cardio assessments down here as well. And there. So these are sort of our most popular, when we talk about doing a fitness assessment, these are sort of the big pillars of what we're going for here, right? And so usually you're going to arrange them in the order that like you like to do them in. Me personally, I like to, obviously the first thing I'm going to say today, you should always start with the PAR-Q no matter what you like to do. This should be the first thing you do with anybody who walks through the gym door. Then take them through the survey, just a general medical history questionnaire. Then I like to go right into body composition stuff. And then I like to do cardio next because cardio is pretty gentle. It's a good way to kind of get the blood pumping, and then eventually take them into posture assessments. And that's going to sort of tell us a little bit about our client's posture. You can do the posture assessments first if you'd like to. You can do the body composition stuff at the end. It's just that most gyms use the Omron. They use the like bioelectric impedance body fat testers, which if you exercise, that can throw off the results a little bit. So I don't like to do that at the end. I like to do that in the beginning, but I know plenty of trainers who are just like, it doesn't throw it off that much. And they're right. It really doesn't affect it much. But again, trying to minimize errors here. So So we're going to start with a fitness assessment. So a fitness assessment, by definition, very useful for getting insight into our client's past medical and physical history. And it's going to be divided into two primary types of information. Subjective information, which is immeasurable, but still very valuable information, and objective information. The objective stuff is the very measurable stuff, right? So like if I asked David how much he weighs, that is objective information. It's measurable, right? But if I asked him what his favorite style of training is, like when he does physical activity, what his favorite thing to do is, right? That's very subjective. It doesn't make, it doesn't directly have something that I can look for improvement on, like directly in the way that like I can track measurable data, but it does obviously play a role in how I'm going to train him. If he's like, oh, I really like boxing, I think it's a really fun like style of cardio, I like to do this, I like to do that, I'm really good at it, right? Oh, okay, awesome. Like I can tell he's stoked on this one thing. Chances are, like if I'm warming him up for 5 minutes just to get the blood flowing and stuff, I'm going to do something like jump rope, or I'm going to do something like maybe just like warming up on a bag for a few minutes, nothing crazy, before taking him into the actual strength training routine. Just 5 minutes, you know what I mean? So that's why subjective information is very valuable. I think that, and this could just be me, this could be an opinion that just I have, but I think it's really easy for personal trainers sometimes to not emphasize subjective information. Like we put a big emphasis on objective stuff because it's very measurable, right? It's like, well, your pounds are going down, your body fat percentage is changing, your inches are changing, right? It's all very, very, very measurable data. And measurable data is great because you can track it, you know what I mean? But I really encourage you guys to put emphasis on subjective information as well, because it's the why behind the what. Like the what is their weight? What is their body fat percentage? But why is their weight outside of a normal range? Why is their body fat percentage, not where we're hoping for it to be? The why behind those things is oftentimes much more interesting, actually, and also like a huge part of the information that we need to have. So that is where like subjective information is really, really valuable. Now, like I said, it's general information about your client. You cannot necessarily measure it, but it's things like your client's contact information, which you do need to have anyways. Your client's goals is a really big one, right? Obviously, we want to know what our client is working towards. Emergency contact info, and anything that may be contraindicated for them when it comes to exercise. And when I say contraindicated, what I mean is like what should be avoided with your client. If your client has high blood pressure, for instance, right? Let's say they're like, oh yeah, under like medical conditions, I do have, pretty severe hypertension. It's like, okay, great. Thanks for letting me know. Now I know that they have blood pressure problems, which means they're going to have blood movement problems. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to absolutely 100% avoid any type of exercise that whips their head around too much, right? I don't want to take their head up. I want them to back down. I don't want to move their head around too much because their blood pressure might not be able to like support that. So what will end up happening is they'll get dizzy really quickly and they might pass out. Not really going to hurt them, actually. They're probably medically safe, fine, but like they're not going to be happy with me. So even like stability ball crunches, which is something where they're just moving their head back and forth, not really recommended for clients with hypertension. But I do know right off the bat, before I've even walked onto the gym floor, if I can start maybe considering how to write like a peripheral heart action circuit, which guys, for those of you who don't know, for some, actually, I just realized we actually don't have any new folks in here this morning. You guys have all been with me for at least a month. But a peripheral heart action circuit looks like this, right? We've got one, two, oh my God, 3. Why is this not doing this automatically? Let's say we got exercises here. We do like a body weight squat. Well, that's a lower body exercise. So then we go to the upper body and we do like a standing table chest press, right? We go back to the lower body. We do something like, let's say like a step up to balance. And then we pair that up with like a standing table row. Let's go with I don't know, X-band lateral walk, right? That's for the legs. And then we go with our final exercise. We'll do like a single, actually we'll do, a Bosu ball, standing shoulder. So what we did is we went like glutes and quads up to like the chest, back down to like glutes and quads, back up to the upper back, down into the medial glute, back up to the shoulders. So we went upper body, lower body, upper body, lower body, upper body, lower body, upper body. And by doing that, we're going to evenly distribute blood throughout the body, and their blood vessels are actually going to be doing reps, right? Like when we start using the shoulders, the blood vessels are going to open up to the shoulders, they're going to close down for the legs. And when we start using the legs, the bloods are going to open up for the legs and close down for the shoulders. And it's going to go back and forth. And so what we're doing is we are doing reps for their blood vessels, right? We are doing reps in their arteries and veins. I got to understand that thanks to the subjective information where my client told me that they were struggling with hypertension. And so when they start to see really good results in the future, that is because I gathered the why behind the what. You know, like the what could be like if I did blood pressure testing with them that day, I could find that it's high blood pressure, right? But then I find that like they got a really stressful job, they got like this, they got that, right? They got all these things. It's like, hey, let's start working on this. Like, let's see if we can get your blood pressure back to normal ranges, you know? Again, that's why I think that subjective information is very, 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 very valuable. Now, first bit of subjective information, and this is not only valuable, but I think it is absolutely mandatory. First thing you always want to do with every client is you want to do the PAR-Q. That's the Physical Activity Readiness Questionnaire. This is going to be a series of questions that is directed towards detecting any problem in the cardiorespiratory system. So if your client answers yes to anything on the PAR-Q, you need to make sure they have a physician's permission before you start exercising. Now, the new version of the PAR-Q they released in 2020 is really good because it does have some information down here during the like writing section where they are basically attesting that all the information on there is true and valid, right? If they say yes to anything on this list, you want to move on to these lower sections and get more specific and ask questions directly related towards that, right? So you want to figure out like if they have any bone or joint problems, get a little bit more specific about any types of cancers or any types of any other general medical, problems that aren't necessarily like listed here. And then if they answered yes to everything here in the follow-up questions, what you can do is you can have them still sign like this participant declaration, which says like, look, I am taking my health into my own hands. I want to continue training, even though, yes, I do have these medical problems, right? So, and for the record, if they have a doctor's permission from the start, great, that's what's going to happen, you know? The original PAR-Q was a little bit more simple. It was literally just a couple questions related to the cardiorespiratory system. If they said yes to anything, you wanted to make sure that they had doctor's permission before they started exercising. Now, we are lucky enough to live in California where verbal contracts are a thing. So if your client tells you, hey, my doctor told me to come get a gym membership and get a trainer, then you're actually fairly covered as long as that comes out of your client's mouth. You can say like, hey, so that means that like your doctor told you to come here. You're not just like coming here against doctor's orders or whatever. And that way, like you are somewhat covered. You are somewhat covered in that way as long as you ask them. And that's where you can have them sign the PAR-Q and it's fine, you know, but that's not necessarily true everywhere. You know, certain states are a little bit more strict about that stuff and you want to get like an actual note from their doctor. Personally, I think that would really gum things up, but I don't know. I've only ever worked in Oregon and California. So once we get through that, and honestly, guys, that should take you less than 5 minutes. That should take you less than 3 minutes to get through. Like PAR-Q is very quick. You're going to move on to the general medical history questionnaire. So the general health history questionnaire is going to get, again, it's going to get you the information about the why behind things, right? So you are going to get some emergency contact info here, which is nice. You are going to get a little bit about their medical history. But if you are talking particularly about weight loss, you know, you're going to get a couple of your clients' goals here, which is really nice. Well, some of the other stuff that you can throw into the general history questionnaire is you can start to throw like a 24-hour dietary recall or a food frequency questionnaire or a food journal, right? Now, these things aren't listed on NASM's website. They actually don't have these directly, but you can make your own. Or you could just go 24-hour dietary recall, right? Oh, good. The website's broken. That's classy. And that's also not it. Thanks a lot, internet. You suck. Unbelievable. Just give me one, please. This is why I actually used to have these things. Arlene, we were talking about like having stuff freaking how many years should you keep a record? As long as you're working at the gym, so you don't have to deal with stupid Google giving you crap information all the time. That's how long. Jeez. This is obnoxious. There we go. Good Lord. So here is the 24-hour dietary recall here, right? So you're going to ask you're going to get your client's name on there and all that stuff. And you're just going to ask them, you're going to say, hey, let's work our way backwards, 24 hours, right? Tell me what time you had what was the last thing you ate? And they're like, well, it's, you know, 9 a.m. right now. Earlier, you know, this morning I had breakfast. It was 2 eggs, a cup of egg, and a quarter cup of egg whites, a handful of spinach, 2 multi-grain toaster waffles, and a chopped up banana to go on top. Cool, great, love that. Notice how detailed that was. That was my breakfast this morning, or is going to be my breakfast after class, actually. Sorry. So we would say like, great. There we go. So we got the amount written down. We've got what time they ate it, and then a description of like what it is. And then we go back a little bit further. It's like, what'd you have for dinner last night? What'd you have? Any snacks before that? Right. And then we just go back 24 hours. And now we don't have like the world's most accurate food journal, but we have a pretty good idea of what our client's been eating. This can be, but it is optional, part of your subjective information eating habits, guys. So generally, you're going to work your way through this lifestyle history questionnaire right here, right? So you can see this is questions about like, hey, what activities do you currently partake in? Do you run? Do you weightlift? Do you do group exercise classes? How many days a week would you say you get like 60 minutes of activity? Lots of questions. Here's our diet questions, like, scale of 0 to 10, do you consider your diet to be healthy? Do you get a lot of, what's your sugar intake like? What's your salt intake like? What's your fat intake like? Guys, don't spend 6 hours on these questionnaires, but definitely get this information down. You want to like get good at this stuff where you can move through it really, really quickly. You should only be working on this worksheet and having your client answer these 3 pages of questions. It should really only take you 5 or 10 minutes. Any longer than that, and you are eating into like very valuable time that you have to like show your client how to do things and do some of the physical assessments, which things like the 3-minute step test take 3 minutes, like they take a while. So you want to make sure that you're kind of getting through this as quickly as possible. What's your occupation? Does it require extended periods of sitting? All these things. And then questions about their diet. If you want to throw these in, they're very optional. I don't love a 24-hour dietary recall. I would much rather have someone just start food journaling, and then we can look at that information together. But I do really like to do like a food frequency questionnaire. That is kind of built in here. You can see, right? Like, what do you consider your diet? Is it healthy? What's your salt intake? What's your sugar intake? What's your fat intake? And then like asking just general questions about how often do you say you go out for fast food? How often do you eat out at restaurants? How often do you cook at home? Right? That's also very valuable information, because if they're like, oh, I eat out at restaurants all the time, what do we think that means? It means that they have no idea how many calories they're bringing in. right? They're like, oh no, it's listed on the menus. And it's like, yeah, it is, but we don't know if the, Bob in the back is like just throwing extra olive oil into every meal. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but like it could be an extra 100 calories every single time, So that's why, again, subjective information is so valuable, right? So that is the immeasurable stuff, right? We're going to start with all that subjective information. Now, this is all done at the desk, right? You are doing this as they like come in, right? You look at the gym floor, right? They come into the front desk, they go over to the sales area, and there's probably a bunch of desks set up there. And that's where like this whole conversation is taking place for right now. And your client's been sitting down, you've been asking him questions, right? That's actually really, really great because now we can start to pivot into our objective information. So objective information is the measurable stuff, right? This is things like, this is very number-based information. It's things like, what is their body weight? What's their resting heart rate, which we know we need to know when it comes to all the physiology of like, running our calculations for what their target heart rate is. I can't give you a target heart rate without knowing what your, like how good a shape your heart's in general. And I can determine that with your resting heart rate. So we want to make sure that they are at least sitting for at least 5 minutes before we take their blood pressure, before we take their resting heart rate, things like that. Because otherwise those numbers are going to be slightly off. They're going to be ever so slightly elevated. So once we've done that, then we can walk them onto the gym floor. We can get their body composition stuff, cardio assessments, posture, and performance assessments. So that is why the subjective stuff is important. And it is where you do want to get, relatively good at explaining it and moving through it pretty quickly. Anybody have any questions so far about subjective stuff? Is any of that unclear? I know we've practiced it in class a couple times for those of you who have been with us a little bit longer. But does that feel yeah, alrighty. So body composition stuff. So let's get into the objective information, right? So probably right off the bat, wait, why are we already at body composition? Oh, hold on. How did my slides get out of order? 1 second. I actually have to fix that. That's not good. Why are you here? Nope. There we go. Okay. That was going to break my brain. All right, so let's take a look. Our first thing we're going to look at, and NASA likes to break these down. You don't need to know these categories, but they usually break it down into like sections. So we got physiologic assessments, which are all about like cardiorespiratory physiology, body composition, which is all about body composition. That normally we like to start with physiologic. Like I said, you need to make sure that someone is sitting at rest for at least 5 minutes before you try to gather their resting heart rate. They've been sitting while you've been interviewing them. So that actually works really well. But if your client's like, if you stand them up and walk them across the gym and then walk them back, in order to get their resting heart rate, you're going to have to make them sit for 5 minutes and kind of relax first. It's just not a very efficient use of your time. So that's usually why we roll right from the PARQ and general medical history questionnaire right into our physiologic assessment. So things like heart rate, things like blood pressure, right? These are both objective in that like your heart rate's a number, your blood pressure's a number, right? They're very measurable, but they are directly, they should be things that you do directly after someone is like sitting down for 5 minutes. So NASM is going to say, when you're calculating someone's heart rate, they're going to recommend that you use their radial pulse. You want to go use 2 fingers in line with their thumb and index finger just above the wrist on their left hand. So just like that. And you'll be able to feel that pulse, right? You're feeling whenever the left ventricle of the heart is squeezing and it's ejecting blood from the heart. You are squeezing as that blood goes, like you're feeling as it goes like rushing by. So 2 fingers just in line there. NASM is going to say here in the slides 30 seconds and then multiply that by 2. And then you're going to record that 60-second number. You guys are more than welcome to count for a full 60 seconds. That's also going to be very accurate if you do it that way. You can do 15 seconds and multiply by 4, 10 seconds and multiply by 6, 6 seconds and multiply by 10. It doesn't really matter, guys, as long as you are getting it to 60 seconds, because that's how we measure pulse, right? Now, in some clients, it's particularly like weight loss clients, it may be rather difficult to find their pulse on the wrist. That is where you can do the carotid artery. That's 2 fingers just to the side of the Adam's apple on the left side of the body, or just to the side of the larynx, I should say. But you are going to do that for, again, 30 seconds, multiply by 2, go for 60 seconds. It really doesn't matter how you do it. Me personally, I mean, it kind of does. Me personally, if my client's already at rest, I'll try to be as accurate as possible. I'll just do a full 60 seconds. It's really not that much more time out of your life. You know, you're saving 45 to 30 to 45 seconds, you know, it's not really that big a deal. But at the same time, like, you know, if you're placing your hands on someone's neck and, you know, it can get uncomfortable if you're just like holding it there. They're like, I'm not much of a touchy-feely person. I don't like this. Okay, great. Yeah. Maybe do the shorter number, you know, but the shorter it is and the more you're like multiplying it, like, here's how I like to think of it. If you are doing, like, let's say you're measuring it for 6 seconds and then just adding a 0. So you're just multiplying it by 10. It's a really convenient way to do it. And it's very fast and you're moving on with your life quickly. But if you missed like a half a beat in the beginning, because maybe as you like hit the stopwatch, maybe you just, you know, missed a half a beat there. And if you missed a half a beat at the end, that is actually going to be like pretty substantial. That's going to be a difference of 10 beats every minute that you're sort of calculating later on. So I don't know. My advice is to know how to follow your book. 30 seconds multiplied by 2. But in the real world, I usually do it for a full 60 seconds. Just because I am all about accuracy. Now, there are times where I will not do that, and we'll talk about that today in just a moment. But then you're going to figure out their average resting heart rates. Okay, and you're going to run that number. So if they're a male client, average resting heart rate should be somewhere around 70 beats per minute. For average female client, should be about 75 beats per minute. So if their heart rate is faster than that or slower than that, it's going to have implications on their health. It's going to give us a little bit of information right off the bat. So if you're training like a male client that day, your first appointment of the day, and their resting heart rate is like 80 beats per minute, that's showing us that like their resting heart rate's running a little bit fast. Chances are their heart's not very strong, right? It's not pumping very much blood every time it beats. So it's making up for that by beating more often. And that's why their heart rate's a little bit higher. And then your next appointment shows up, it's a female client. And like, let's say her resting heart rate is like 60 beats per minute. And you're going to go, great. Yeah. That shows me that like their heart's really strong. It's injecting blood very efficiently. So it doesn't have to beat very often. And that's why we take a look at resting heart rate. It can be a very valuable piece of information. Hold, please. I think my internet's crapping out. Is that good? Can you guys hear me just fine now? My internet was being a jerk for a second. Everybody hear me? Full sentences, not broken?
You have a little bit of breaking up, but it's not as bad as sometimes where it completely goes out.
Oh, okay. I will try to speak slowly and clearly. Now what's really great about having a resting heart rate is that now you can do their target heart rate. Okay, so remember, NASM is going to break cardio into 3 distinct zones, right? That's not the picture. I thought that was the picture. They're going to break it down into zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3, right? So what you want to do is like get your client to land in the right zone of working out. You're going to give them a target heart rate. If I'm trying to train Joseph for half marathon training. I need him to build up his endurance. It does not make any sense for me to make him sprint at 86 to 95% of his heart rate max, because that does not really support his sport. So instead, I would say, I want you to not, run too fast. I want you to run at the right pace. And that's really like, pace training is honestly kind of a pain in the butt, guys. But it's a big part of like long distance running. You go too hard out the gate, you're going to burn through all your glycogen, and then you're not going to have any fuel for the rest of your race. So I need to know what that is. Well, luckily I can do like the Carvenin formula, right? I can do it really basic, right? I could literally just say, all right, so now I know what your resting heart rate is, but I didn't really need that information. Let's just take into account whatever your age is, right? We use the max heart rate formula. So I can estimate their heart rate max very simply by 220 minus their age, right? So for me, I'm 33, right? So 220 minus 33 means my max heart rate's 187. And if I want to be between 65 and 75% of that, I just go times 65%, which is 0.65. I hit equal. So now I'm going to say, all right, well, my target heart rate is anywhere from 121 to 140. So that's actually 122 to 140. It's not bad, right? But it makes the assumption that I am the same as every 33-year-old on the freaking planet. So instead, we want to use a little bit more of a complicated formula. We call this the heart rate reserve method, right? The heart rate reserve method, also more commonly referred to as the Carvenin formula or the Carvenin method, is going to calculate this using the difference between your max heart rate, which is that 220 minus your age number, and your resting heart rate, which is that number we gathered just a minute ago. And now somebody whose resting heart rate is really, really high is going to get very different numbers from somebody whose resting heart rate is low. And that's going to give us a much more accurate workout for that person directly. Now, there are calculators online for this. There's actually one on NASA. They have the Edge app. It's this thing here. It's this app that you can get, and it has really cool features on it, like it can calculate for you and do all this stuff. It's got some built-in workouts you can assign to your clients. I think it's like $30 a month. Very valuable resource if you're doing it, but if you can do it manually, why not do it manually? So Carvenin calculator, if you guys Google that, I like this. It used to be the first link, man, and now I don't know who this Top End Sports is, but they came in and they moved this for me. I've been using this calculator literally since I was in school. So you go to briancalkins.com. It's just some guy who put this up. But you enter your age, right? I said I was 33. My resting heart rate is currently, I don't know if I'm fully at rest right now, but it's currently 66, which is kind of high for me actually, but we calculate here. And there we go. There's my original formula, right? There's the 65 to 75. There's the 122 to 140 that I just calculated out manually. But if I take into account my resting heart rate, now it's not 122, it's freaking 145. Up to 157. That is a substantially different workout, right? Instead of being 122, it's 145 to 157. That's like a difference of 20 beats per minute, all because I just took in a little bit of extra data. So that's the heart rate reserve method. You don't necessarily need to be able to do that math manually in your head, guys, but you do need to know what the Carvenin formula is or what the heart rate reserve method is. By definition, it is going to calculate target heart rate, the number you're trying to give your client as a target, using the difference between max heart rate, right, and resting heart rate. That's the definition we're looking for here. So then, once you're done with all that, you're going to maybe do their blood pressure. You don't actually have to do this very often. Not every client really needs blood. If your client, like, if you're like, when was the last time you get your blood pressure tested? Is it normal? And they were like, yeah. If they say their blood pressure is normal, in my opinion, there's really no reason to have to test it that day. But if you have a client who, has like struggled with it, you do want to make sure you're gathering their blood pressure just to make sure that like they're not going to pass out during your workout. If their blood pressure is, like 150 or higher, it could be kind of risky to start exercising. It's just already really elevated. I think like the number that NASM said, it's just something to keep in mind. I've definitely worked with people like with their heart blood pressure even in the 160s before. I've made the decision to keep working with them. But I think like the higher, just make sure you don't pass your client. Be cautious, right? If I ever have a client who is like hypertensive, like in that moment, some of it I'll chalk up to nerves. Sometimes people get nervous and their blood pressure goes up. But then I'm just going to prioritize keeping them very upright the entire session. I'm really going to try to make sure that I don't, change their position all the time. You guys everybody in here actually might know somebody. You ever see that person who, it's usually people who are a little bit, heavy. They will often do that rocking forward thing where like they'll be sitting and then they'll get up and they'll go like this to get up, right? So the problem with that, if you are a hypertensive person, the problem with like having high blood pressure is like when you do this and you drop your head down and then you snap it back up as you're standing, right? You do not have the pressure necessary to continually supply blood to your brain. So what'll happen is you'll get like, they sometimes people call it a whiteout, where like all of a sudden your vision just goes, and they'll possibly pass out. You guys have probably experienced that yourself in the reverse direction. I don't know if anybody's ever been, I've had this happen plenty of times where like I'll be sitting around doing nothing, maybe relaxing, reading a book or something. And then all of a sudden I'll be like, okay, let's start my day. And I'll just like pop up off the chair or something. And all of a sudden I'm like, woo, and what that is all the blood is still in your legs, like you were sitting like, this way and blood's going this way. And all of a sudden you stood up and your brain was like, not getting as much blood as I want. So what your brain will actually do as a protective mechanism is it will make you pass out because it's a lot easier for blood to flow like this than it is for it to flow like this. So your brain will actually shut you down for a moment and be like, all right, well, I need pressure. So lay down, and we don't want our client to do that during a session. It's going to be very dramatic. They could get hurt, a lot of reasons not to do it. So if it is sometimes a good idea to take your blood pressure with your clients in the beginning, just to ensure that like they're not dealing with that. So here's the instructions for manual blood pressure testing, guys. I highly doubt you will ever need to do that. I know we gave you the manual blood pressures in your Sochi bags, which we are going on, me working here for, oh God, I'm going on like my 5th, 6th year here. And I have been whining to them to replace those stupid blood pressure cuffs ever since. You do not need them. I know they're only $20, but like, anyway, what you'll end up doing is blood pressure tester. You will literally be able to get one of the electric ones that does it for you for $24. Like if you're going to end up doing this in the gym, you're going to use this one. You strap it on, hit a button. Oh, this guy's stoked. Strap it on, hit a button, and you're good to go. That is much more likely how you are going to do that. Takes 30 seconds, But let's say we move out of physiologic assessments. Let's start taking a look at body composition assessments, which is going to be a huge part of the conversation in this course, right? We need to know body composition if we are working with weight loss clients. So first thing you're going to gather is your body mass index. I didn't even put this in the notes today because we've talked about it so much. You guys know body mass index by this point, right? It is your height. Is your weight, it, and I screwed up. It's your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared, right? And if your BMI is above 25, that is considered overweight until it gets to 30. Once it's above 30, we consider it to be obesity. And that's where we start to really see a lot of health risks. So how the heck are we going to calculate these numbers? Well, the first one we're going to talk about is like a skin fold measurement. We're going to talk about this first because honestly, it's kind of the worst method for actually obese clients. So if you calculate out your client's BMI and they land above 30, right then and there, I'm not going to tell this to my client. with them present or anything. But right then and there, I'm going to make the decision in my brain to not use skin fold caliper testing. It gets less accurate with highly obese individuals. And the same thing is true of like seniors. It's very inaccurate with like senior clients due to like, you know, skin composition changes and things like that. So if I got a client who comes in and I'm looking at them, I'm like, that's a substantially wrinkled person, right? When I'm doing body composition, I'm not going to do skin fold measurements, right? So that's a decision you got to make. But luckily, there are a lot of different methods. There is also bioelectric impedance. That's the one that runs it through like the electric impulse. And then there's even things like, you know, they've got those like really cool DEXA scanners. They got that, and they're not DEXA scanners, but I can't remember what they call the new ones. But they literally have like machines in like Crunch now that they basically use X-rays. They're like body composition scanning. You know, it's very similar to a DEXA scanner, but it doesn't scan at high enough to actually get bone density. Or maybe you're going to do hydrostatic weighing. If you guys are working in a really cool place that actually has hydrostatic weighing, that's awesome. You know, you can do that one. It's a pain in the butt, but highly accurate. So, oh yeah, question.
I have like a scale that you get on like with your shoes off, and it keeps your like your body, your BMI, your body fat, your muscle, how much body mass muscle you have.
So that's the bioelectric impedance. Yeah, most gyms are going to use that. It looks, I'm assuming Dion, yours looks something like this. It's probably one of the kind of standard ones with like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So if you work in a gym, sometimes they'll have these. They'll have like the really fancy ones. This is called the InBody. Oh, actually, no, it's not. Who did I click? Mediana. I don't even know who that is. InBody was like the really big one that was in all gyms for a long time. You guys have probably seen these, but it's the one that looks like this, but it also has like these handles on it. And what's nice about that is that it gives you 4 points of contact. Nowadays, they started to come out with the body fat scales that look like this, where they're just like the ones you have at home with like the 4 electrodes, but now there's a little handle, so you can get more contact. You can get 4 points of contact there. I haven't actually really goofed around with these, but I really like the idea of, you know, that. And yeah, you're right. Like Dion, it'll give you a hand. It'll give you a little readout just like this. So this person here weighs 52.8 kilograms. So their body weight is well, clearly I'm doing that wrong. Oh, it's I do. Let's see how that's not right. kg to lb. Oh yeah, never mind. That is actually right. So 116 pounds. And their muscle mass is about 38% of their weight, water weight. Their fat mass is 28.6%. So that is falling within normal ranges. This is definitely like a female client. Bone density, yeah. And then BMI of 19.3. So that actually is putting them directly in, you know, between 18.5 and 24.9. Great, cool. So I love those body fat scales. Generally, you'll find the InBody in most gyms because the InBody actually has like a built-in, like the scale will talk to a printer, and then you can put in like the InBody sheets. And what you have is a really cool readout that you can show your client, and then it can track themselves over their various like stays. The machine, you punch in their initials, or you can put in, you know, we used to do initial and birth date. And then that way, like every time that same client would come up and take a look at this person here, you can see this is their body composition history. So they used to weigh 143.9, then they lost about 4 pounds. And then their weight kept going down until now they're about 130. And it's even got like a QR code, so you can put that into your own phone and stuff. So like, it's kind of cool, you know, these are very popular in a lot of gyms. And the only problem is they're expensive. And then those printing sheets, they make those things are a racket. Like, I remember having to order those things, and I was like, these pages cost we can make our own copies. But apparently you're not really supposed to do that. So yeah, that's a bioelectric impedance scale. It's sending electricity from point A to point B. If it travels fast, body fat percentage is low. If it travels slow, body fat percentage is high. So the higher the fat mass, the more impeded the flow will be. I think you've got a homework question about this concept today, guys. I think that's what that is. It's going to say like, you know, this method of body composition testing, you know, travels the speed at which an electric impulse, you know, and you'd be like, oh, that's bioelectric impedance. Now there is, like I said, there is skin fold measuring. Let's say you have a client who, you know, wants to lose weight, but they're not exactly like, you know, super high body fat percentage. So they're a good candidate for skin fold testing. Cool, you can do that as well. Personally, I'm not sure why you would if you've got the body fat scale. It's so much easier to use, but sometimes skin fold measurement can actually be more accurate. So what you're going to do is you're probably going to use the Dernan formula. Now, in the new edition of the textbook, NASM actually started putting in the other methods as well. So you can actually choose which method you want to use. So you can see like skin fold measurement here, and it has protocol, and you just list whichever one you like. And you can do all of these different sites. So there are different protocols out there. There is the Jackson Pollock. There's the Dernan Womersley, which is the one we use. You can see this is Dernan here. Triceps, biceps, subscapular, and iliac crest. What are some of the other ones? Jackson Pollock. Let's see. Yeah, Jackson Pollock. What's this one? Oh, that's also Jackson Pollock, apparently. I didn't know they even had two names for them. So yeah, so there's different methods you guys can choose. Personally, guys, I've been using that Dernan formula for years. It's really accurate. Like 4 sites works really well. And what you do is you just total up all the numbers. So let's say the bicep was 10 millimeters and the tricep was 10 millimeters and subscapular and iliac was a total of like, you know, 40 millimeters. Cool. 40 plus 10 plus 10, that's 60 millimeters total. So you look on the little sheet. And you look at their age and you calculate it out. Oh, that's not the calculator. That's not the sheet. Yeah, there you go. So you're going to say, all right, so there it is. So my client was, let's say, you know, 42 years old, and they're male clients, so they're between 40 and 49. And I said they had 60 millimeters worth of folds, so 60. That puts their body fat percentage at about 27.1%, which would put them into an overweight category. Not incredibly obese or anything like that, but definitely overweight, right? So if we can drop 7% body fat, we've immediately got our client into a normal range. So like I said, biceps, that's a vertical fold halfway between the shoulder and the elbow. Triceps, vertical fold halfway between the shoulder and the elbow. Subscapular is a 45-degree fold just below the scapula. And an iliac crest is a 45-degree fold just above that iliac crest that you're going to feel there, right? Just above the flare of your pelvis. So we calculate it all up. We find our body fat percentage. Now, why is that so valuable? We keep talking about body fat percentage. Why is it so good? Well, it actually tells you what your client's body composition is. Like, so, you know, it's funny, Dion, the only thing your scale did is it did 2 things. It asked you, well, it did 3 things. It asked you to enter your information, your stats. So you put in your age, right? And we're good. Like that's all I had to do. I had to be like, great, now I know how old you are. Awesome. And then it weighed you. So it's got your body weight. And then the third one is it actually just tested body fat percentage, right? But it gave you a readout of way more than 3 things. right? It said your body fat percentage. It said your BMI probably. It said your fat mass, your bone mass, right? It said all this stuff, right? The way it was able to do that are these formulas right here. So the only thing it had to actually do was calculate your body weight and body fat. And that's all it really had to do. So then let's say we got a client whose body weight is 200 pounds. Their percentage of body fat is 30%. Guess what? I can calculate out the rest, right? I can figure out what their body mass is. That's everything. That's how much they weigh, right? And then their fat mass is just their body mass, the number of their weight times their body fat percentage. So a 200-pound person with 30% body fat has 60 pounds of fat. So then I just take 60 away from the total 200 pounds, their body mass minus their fat mass. That means they have a fat-free mass of 140 pounds. So let's say this same client comes in 4 weeks later and they retest and their body weight is down to, let's say like 192, and their body fat percentage is down to, let's say 28%. So now 192 times 0.28 for 28%. That means they have a new fat mass of 53.76 pounds. And then that's 192 minus 53.76. That means that they have a new muscle mass of 138.2 pounds. So they lost 8 pounds of body weight, and about 6 pounds of it was body fat, and about 6.5 pounds and about 1.5 pounds. 1.5 pounds was lean body mass. So am I worried about that? I'm like, oh, they're losing muscle mass. Probably not really. You know, that's actually a pretty good rate. That's like a 60, that's 8. Yeah, that's about like 60%. That's pretty good. This is probably somebody who is just on a diet alone. I would probably try to preserve their muscle mass a little bit better in the next bit. So I'm probably going to up their strength training and lower their cardio actually. But they're moving in the right direction, right? So now I can make a little bit of a course correction. That actually wasn't bad. It's very difficult to lose fat guys without losing a little bit of muscle. I'm not sure I loved that ratio there. That was like 66% fat, 33% muscle. I usually like that. I like that ratio to be closer to like 75-25. But it was close. It wasn't bad, right? So now I can just make small adjustments in the protocol. Be like, hey, you know what? I know I was having you do like 3 days of cardio, 3 days of strength training. I think what we're going to do is we're going to up it to 4 days of strength training and 2 days of cardio. Great. Okay, let's change up the program, you know? Next thing in the body composition realm, obviously very relevant for our weight loss clients, are going to be circumference measurements. So this is also a very valuable piece of information for 2 reasons. Number one, it's a really great way to track progress. You know, I've definitely had clients who their body fat percentage hasn't shifted very much according to the scale. And then all of a sudden I check their inches and I'm like, man, all of these numbers are better. You know what that means? It means the scale was probably a little bit off. And that happens sometimes. Bioelectric impedance is not exactly the most accurate way to do body fat percentage. I like it a lot. It's super convenient. It's fast. It's easy. But if your client got a really bad night's sleep and their body's all stressed out, which is causing them to retain water, what sucks about that is we know stress is bad, right? Stress always makes everything in life a little bit worse. It makes your body fat percentage numbers actually a little bit better. That sucks. So it actually makes your numbers look a little bit more favorable, because what happens is you start retaining water, and water and muscle on the body fat scale kind of come out the same way. So it can actually kind of throw off your numbers. We used to, when I worked at Biggest Loser, we had so much fun. We would goof around with our body fat scale. We would like test ourselves and then go drink like, you know, a ton of water, and then like test ourselves again. And then we like go pee, like test ourselves again, like do a bunch of push-ups and test ourselves again. And it would fluctuate like crazy. It was always relatively close, but it would have like small fluctuations. So if I saw a client, I calculated out that I was like, oh, you lost 6 pounds, but 2 of it was muscle, I could chalk some of that up to mistakes in the machine. That will happen sometimes, you know. This is why if anybody's ever used those scales, and Dion, I wouldn't be surprised if you on when you bought yours, I'll bet it had the instruction manual. It probably said, hey, try to do this first thing in the morning after you go to the bathroom. It'll be like,
Yeah.
get up. Is that what it said?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what they're doing is they're trying to get you consistent at the same time every day so that you can't have too many variables going into the scale. And they're trying to get you to unload as much water as possible beforehand. So that's why we do things that way. And why I told you earlier, don't let your client work out before you do body fat testing. Otherwise, it kind of goofs up the numbers. So we're going to do circumference measurements next, right? This is another valuable piece of data. So we're going to do the neck right across the Adam's apple. We're going to do the chest at the first flattening part of the chest. So for male clients, that's pretty easy. It's just usually straight on the nipple line because it's pretty flat. With female clients though, guys, you're going to want to go to just as everything is like flattening out. That's where you're going to do chest measurements. Unless what I do with my clients, that's what NASM is going to tell you. It's going to go the first apparent flattening of the chest. Me personally, like just tell your client to place it on the middle of their chest. And what will happen is they will place it right along the nipple like every single time. And you just have your client place it yourself. So you take the tape measure, pull it apart, hold it like this and say, do me a favor, place that right along. And then you give yourself a little slack over here. They pull it tight. You go around the back. It doesn't make anybody uncomfortable. It's very easy. Just biggest pro tip when doing measurements, and we're going to practice this, don't trap yourself under the arm. Give yourself enough slack to where the tape measure will land in the middle of their upper back. That's the biggest tip I can give you. But honestly, that's how I like to do it. But the official version would be like the first apparent flattening of the chest. That one's not a super important measurement though. Anyway, wait, actually one other really important thing, and my guys in the room, you probably won't think about this, but trust me, it comes with experience. Tell your female clients, tell all of your clients, but especially your female clients, to make sure they wear the same outfit every time they come in for a reassessment. So like whatever they wore that day, encourage them to wear, like this is why before and after photos are actually super handy. It's more about the clothing than anything in my opinion. But you tell them to wear the same outfit, especially the same sports bra, because those numbers can fluctuate like crazy. And you'll be like, you gained 3 inches this week. And also, and like they lost like 6 pounds of body weight. That doesn't make any sense. You know, like do that. It is wildly important to be consistent there. So that's the chest measurement. Waist measurement. Remember, these are the 2 most important ones, the waist and the hips. Waist measurement, you always go with the narrowest part of the waist. If there is no narrowing, you can just go straight to the belly button. For the hip measurements, you're going to have them stand with feet together. You're going to go to the widest part of the hips. And that is a lateral view there. And then now that you've got a narrow part of the waist and a widest part of the hips, you're going to look at that ratio. That's going to give you the waist to hip ratio, right? So when we look at that, right, let's say you measure your client and you find, that's not the button I wanted to click. Let's say you find that, they've got more of a body shape like this. This tends to be a little bit higher risk than this here, which is a little bit more like pear-shaped. The apple sort of body shape just tends to be more associated with health risks. We think, we're not sure, we think that the reason is because there's just more body fat insulating the organs. But this is one of the reasons why we do our waist to hip ratio. If it is, for women, if it's 0.8 or below, that is what we're going for there. If it's 0.8 or above, that is less than ideal. For men, we want it to be below 0.95. If it's above that, that is, again, less than ideal. So that is how we are going to sort of use this information. And here you can see sort of what I'm talking about, right? Like here's 2 very different looking bodies overall, but their waist to hip ratio is actually the same. This person's got a BMI of 24. This person's got a BMI of 35. So this person is in the middle range there, right? And this person's obese. In fact, 35, they're class 2 obesity, right? So their waist is 80 centimeters, their hips are 100. This person their waist is 100, their hips are 125. Their waist to hip ratio is both 0.8 in both examples. So what does that mean? Well, it means that this person who is like obese is actually at a lower health risk than some other individuals who might have an actual lower body fat, but actually might be at increased health risk because of where their body fat is distributed. This is the genetics conversation again. You know, this is determined by genetics. It's something you're kind of stuck with, but it's data, you know, and so it's data that we can use. Don't put too much stock in it. But again, don't put too much stock in any one piece of data ever. That's not just fitness assessment advice. That's not physiology advice. That's advice for life. You know? Like, but it is something definitely to pay attention to. We got the thigh. You can do your thigh 10 inches above the patella. NASM's been saying that for years. A lot of people don't have 10 inches of patella. You're going to be training like people who are, you know, 5'2", you know. If that's the case, just write down whatever number you did. I usually actually do 6 inches personally, just always. Because you know, also don't want to get up in somebody's crotch either. Thigh, that's the thigh measurement. Calf measurement. This is an interesting one. This is the widest circumference of the calf. So you're just looking sort of subjectively and be like, I think that's the widest part. Same thing is true of the arms, which are not on this one. But if you do biceps, you're going to go with the widest part of the biceps. If they're doing like that flexed bicep measurement. So like I said, waist to hip ratio, we do know there's a correlation between like waist to hip ratios that are outside of normal ranges, and particularly like heart disease and diabetes. Questions on body composition assessments, questions on the body fat stuff, questions on the circumference, anything, guys? I let my coffee get way too cold today. Okay. Cardio assessments. These are kind of fun. So cardiorespiratory assessments are all about how your cardiovascular system is performing, which with a lot of like weight loss clients, they are going to want to do cardio because cardio is a very easy way to consistently burn a target number of calories. So cardio is just a tool. It's a really great tool. Now, it's not better than weight training for weight loss. In fact, in the next couple of days, I want to say tomorrow, we are going to see a really cool example of sort of what it means to do, like, you know, be on a calorie restricted diet, and what it means to just diet, what it means to diet plus do cardio, and what it means to diet plus do cardio and strength training. We're going to look at how people have lost body fat percentage, and they've looked at this. And the percentage of fat versus muscle mass loss has been different in all three examples. Usually the one with strength training is the best, you know? So now you might be going, oh, should I only strength train? I don't need to do cardio. Well, again, we like cardio. It is a very valuable tool because it puts your heart rate at a high number consistently. And in terms of calorie burn, it's a very easy way to consistently burn a specific number of calories. So in order to do that, we want to make sure that, you know, we're doing cardio for a variety of reasons. We want to keep our ticker working. We also want to make sure that we can burn calories efficiently, effectively, and probably most important, measurably, right? So we need to make sure we know what their starting point is. That is why we have cardiorespiratory assessments. Now, you guys saw me put a lot of emphasis on the YMCA step test the last time we practiced that, which is a 3-minute bout of stair climbing, submaximal stair climbing. So you don't want to use the Stairmaster for this. You want to use a 12-inch box. I realize I'm on the wrong thing here. Yeah, oh, that's right. It's not in the slides. You want to use a 12-inch box, and you're going to go at a pace of 96 steps per minute. So you're going to use a metronome, and you're going to place it to 96. And hit play. And they're going to go left, right, up, up, down, left, right, left, right. And they're going to go for 3 minutes. The reason we're so specific about that is because everybody who's ever taken this test has experienced the same amount of stress. And now what I can do is I can look to see how well you performed versus everyone else ever, right? So we can look on our sheet. And take a look at their numbers and see what their recovery pulse was. So the idea behind the step test is, it's 96 steps per minute and it's 3 minutes. So that's 288 steps that everybody who's ever taken the test did. And they all did it on a 12-inch step. And we recovered their pulse for 60 seconds afterwards, everybody who's ever taken the test. If their pulse recovered really quickly, they're in great shape. If their pulse recovers very slowly, they're not in such good shape. So that's how that test works. And that's why, earlier I said you can do your heart rates. You can do it 6 seconds times 10. You can do 10 seconds times 6, 15 times 4, 30 times 2, or you can do a full 60 seconds, right? That is true of resting heart rates. And it's true of in the middle of a workout heart rates. It is not true of this test. This test right here is about what their heart rate does over 60 seconds of recovery. So everybody who takes, if you did 15 seconds and then just mathed out the rest, that would be 15 seconds. It'd be the same for all 15 seconds because you just multiply it by 4. That's going to screw up the numbers. It's going to make them look really bad. So what you should do is you should take it for a full 60 seconds immediately once the test is over, and their heart rate is going to go. And it's going to slow down slowly. That's what we want. The person who slows down fast, they're in great shape. So if I got a 45-year-old client who their heart rate recovered to 120 beats, right? That puts them right here in the below average category. So now I know exactly what type of workout routine to give my client. I go back to my Karpinen formula that I calculated out earlier. I'm going to give that person zone 1, that way I don't go too hard on them. They don't really qualify for zone 2 or zone 3. It's probably not safe. Now, I just walked through the YMCA step test, but you'll notice it's not in the PowerPoints. It is not very relevant for obese individuals. Unfortunately, a 12-inch step, stepping up and down on that is pretty high impact. And so it's not really recommended for a lot of obese weight loss clients. So instead, we are going to put the emphasis on what is called the Rockport walk test, which is a little bit harder on the shins. Chris, I know you can attest to that because I tried to break your shins the last time I had you do this. I usually have one student do it because doing it as a group is pretty impractical. But basically, you're going to walk a mile as fast as you can. And then we're going to use some big fancy math to estimate what your VO2 max is at the end of that 1 mile walk. And we're going to look to see how well you did. So if we look at a Rockport walk test calculator here, and I got a client who's, I said 40 years old. Let's say they're 221 pounds, and their heart rate at the end of the test was, let's say, 145, and it took them 18 minutes and 12 seconds to complete. If I hit calculate here, oh, okay, they did very poorly. I made it a little bit too bad. Yeah, they did very poor. They literally got a 0. Most people are not going to get a 0. People who would have gotten a 0 wouldn't have finished. Let's make that test 15 minutes. There we go. So that puts them at a score of 14. They're in the bottom 14th percentile of the 40-year-old age group. That's not great. So now what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and raise it. Their VO2 max is currently about 34. So we want to get their VO2 max. So we test them in 4 weeks, and we look for some improvements. Let's say they drop 30 seconds off their test, right? So now it's 14 minutes and 42 seconds there, right? And their heart rate did a little bit better, up to 140, right? Or down to 140. Hey, calculate here. Take a look. Now they did fair. That's too big of an improvement. let's say they've lost a little bit of weight in 4 weeks too. We'll say they're down to 210, right? So they're actually doing pretty well now. They're doing fair. They're still going to get a zone 1 routine. You know, they're not crushing it or anything, but that's definitely not as bad as it was, right? So for clients who did poor or fair, they're going to get zone 1 for their cardio. But as soon as they get to average, like let's say, again, my client keeps improving, their heart rate's down to 135, they dropped 40 seconds off that one, so 1402, and they've lost a little bit more weight, they're down to 199 pounds. Now they're average, right? Well, guess what? Average clients qualify for zone 2. So I'd be like, hey, guess what? We're going to amp up your cardio routine and we're going to start doing a little bit of interval training. So now I can introduce some medium intervals. I'm not going to go crazy, right? But I'm going to start doing some medium interval training. And now I'm making sure that I never push their heart too hard. I'm building a routine that is catered specifically to them. And I love to show people this while I'm sitting them down at the desk. Once I'm done with my client, like doing the fitness assessment, I take them back to the desk. I'm going to try and sell them like a package. I'm like, hey, check a look. These are your numbers currently. But let's say we start working with each other for the next 4 weeks. If your numbers just improved by, let's say 5%, and so I'll just like change the numbers by like 5, maybe 10%. And then all of a sudden it's like, guess what? You're going to qualify for a harder cardio routine. Now, I know it doesn't sound good because that means I'm going to kick your butt a little bit harder, but that means that you are doing better and your results will actually speed up rather than plateauing. You explain it that way to your clients and they're like, oh my gosh, can't wait to keep working with you in the next 4 to 6 weeks. You know what I mean? It gets people excited about the future. You're not manipulating anybody through any fancy sales techniques. You're just getting people stoked about their future success. So yeah, so those are our cardio assessments. You guys know I got to ask. Any questions or comments? You guys feeling good?
Good, good.
All right.
Good.
Love it. I'm seeing the thumbs up. Okay. Posture, my favorite. So let's I'm seeing a wall of thumbs up. Let's take a look at our posture assessments, right? So posture assessments, now these are great, but I will say with some of your, like, if you have a very obese client, your list of posture assessments that you are capable of doing will sometimes diminish. Now, this is kind of an interesting conversation. You guys have maybe had this conversation before. In my opinion, posture assessments are the best assessments. They're my favorite because I know which version of a chest exercise to give you based on your posture assessment. I know which version of a shoulder exercise, which version of a leg exercise to give you. You know, like there's a big difference between deadlifts and squats. Like one is very anterior chain and one is very posterior chain, but they both work the glutes pretty effectively. So which one do you want to focus on? It kind of depends on the client. If I got a client with a really bad like hip flexor complex, probably going to put the emphasis on like posterior chain. So I'm going to, like, try to strengthen up the posterior chain because their anterior chain is already a little too tight. But if I got a client with a posterior pelvic tilt, like butt tucking, probably going to put the emphasis on the front. So so which one's better, right? Well, neither. I think they're both really good assessments, you know? And that's why we have things like the overhead squat. Now, that's why I love them. Here's the problem with posture assessments and some obese clients. If your client has very excessive body weight, it can be very hard on their joints to do certain assessments. So they are sometimes optional. Now, doesn't that mean you're just going to pick exercises at random at that point and you're not going to know? Maybe you're making their overactive muscles worse. You might, you know, but here's the thing. This is where the priority is keeping this person alive, getting their heart healthy, and simply burning some calories. Is there a chance that without doing a posture assessment properly, you're going to make their overactive or underactive muscles maybe even a little bit worse? Yeah, you could. But you can always fix those things down the line once they get more mobile because you've addressed their excessive body weight. Now, this case, by the way, this scenario that I'm throwing out is only like going to happen in really extreme cases. But for instance, again, when I was working at Biggest Loser, And we had clients who were 400, 500 pounds, regularly, by the way. This wasn't an uncommon occurrence. People would be like, man, like, is it safe to exercise? Honestly, it's much higher risk for someone to exercise like that. But I would argue that it is much, 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 much higher risk to do nothing. Is there a risk of them twisting an ankle? Yeah, absolutely. Of course there is, but everybody has that risk, and it's higher for them. But the risk of heart disease, which is way more serious than a broken ankle, twisted ankle, something like that, is way more dangerous. So you know what? We're going to put the emphasis where it needs to go. So today, everybody who's been through my other assessment classes, you're going to notice that my posture notes are a little bit shorter than normal. We're not going to talk as much about this because honestly, it is a lower priority for obese clients than it is for your average everyday, person who, your weekend warrior, you know what I mean? So we know that posture is hugely important. Our definition of posture is actually up here in the slides. Every movement needs a base of support from which to accept and generate force. That's actually our definition of posture. It's the alignment of the human movement system at any given time, and we want to make sure that it's proper, right? So we call this neuromuscular efficiency when we're talking about using our posture, right? Recruiting the right muscle at the right time for the right amount of force. Oftentimes people have muscle imbalances, right? So this is a pretty well balanced individual. Their mastoid process is lining up with their shoulder, which is lining up with their hip, which is lining up with their ankle. He's got a little bit of a forward lean, but this is pretty darn good, right? His pelvis is neutral. It's not tipping this way. It's not tipping this way, right? His shoulders are here. They're not protracted. They're nice and retracted. This is really decent posture, right? What we'll often see, is something like this. We see like a what we call a muscle imbalance, right? So we're seeing a normal muscle that is like, you know what? There it is. So this guy in the picture here, he's in a good spot, right? He's got an even distribution of like one side and the other, right? That's an even. He doesn't have an overactive muscle that's pulling too much and an underactive muscle that's not pulling enough, right? This is what we're seeing in someone who's got altered posture. So this is a postural imbalance, right? Somebody who has an anterior pelvic tilt, right, is experiencing that. Actually, there's a picture right there, right? So this is actually a posterior pelvic tilt, or a sway back posture is what's sometimes called. So the pelvis is actually rotating this way, and then the back is curving this way, and then the head is coming forward. It's keeping them balanced, but it's causing like too much stress on certain parts of the body. There are just all over the body, tight muscles on one side of a joint and weak muscles on the other. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to do the stretches for the tight side, and we need to loosen up we need to strengthen up the weak side, right? And get these muscles active. And that way they're going to start using the right muscles. So for our obese clients, we're going to put a huge emphasis on static postural assessments, which don't require any movement. They're very safe. And basically, you're just going to observe your client passively as they are standing. So if we look at a static posture assessment, and by the way, NASM has got its static posture assessment. I kind of forgot to keep referencing these sheets, but there's the body composition stuff. There's the cardio stuff, right? Well, here's the overactive, underactive muscle stuff, right? So if we look from the front view, the anterior view, and we're doing a static posture assessment, right? We're going to look to see how their alignment is on the front. Let's take a look at this person here. This is great, by the way. These grids, these are amazing. But you'll notice she's actually shifting to her right. See that? Like she's definitely like tilted this way. This girl's got a scoliosis, which is going to be pretty rare. You don't see too many of those, but you can actually see like this shoulder is actually a little bit more elevated than this one. That's causing her to tip this way. That's a really advanced one. Let's pick a simple one, please. Whoa, ouch. Actually, speaking of scoliosis, look at that. Ouch. Good Lord. That is achy. So she's got a bit of a scoliosis there. Also, though, look at her feet. She's got her feet are flattening and her feet are turning out. So she's got pronation. So that's not very good. Actually, there's another one. It's another scoliosis. Why are so many what is going on with the internet right now? It's obsessed with showing me scoliosis. But you can see here's an anterior pelvic tilt, right? We can see a really intense like angle there. That's like they actually got a list here. It's about 24 degrees. That's a little bit too much. So that's what I was kind of looking for with an anterior pelvic tilt. No, not in that one. With an anterior pelvic tilt, what's happening is there are overactive muscles on the front of the hip that are pulling the pelvis down. And there are underactive muscles in the glutes that are not supporting the pelvis back upright. Where did that picture go? Her, and then there it is, right? So here, she's got tight muscles in the hips and weak muscles in the abdomen. That's also why there's a little bit of an abdominal pooch there. And then she's got really tight muscles in the low back and weak glute muscles here. So that's what's causing this anterior rotation of the pelvis, right? So the first girl with the feet turning out, I would say she has what's called Pesplanus Syndrome, which is more commonly referred to as Pronation distortion syndrome. It's the flattened feet, right? That's going to cause the knees to cave in. It's going to cause too much pressure on the hip. A lot of aches and pains are going to come from posture like that. So I'd mark her as a yes. The girl with the anterior pelvic tilt, I would mark her as a lower crossed syndrome, right? Which is the anterior pelvic tilt. So way too much rotation happening here, not staying neutral. And an upper cross syndrome is the rounding of the shoulders and the elevated shoulders. Mark them yes. So static posture assessments, guys, super valuable for clients who are focusing on weight loss because you don't have to put them through any stress. You should do a static assessment with everyone. A lot of times you can just see it. I'm sure now that you guys have been through these posture assessments, you're like me and you've been ruined for life. And now you're just constantly judging people in the world, you know, like, nope, feet are flattening. Nope, tight calves. Nope, you know, tight hips. You know, like,
yes, that is so true.
yeah.
When I go for my walk, I check out the way everybody else walks.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I used to. That ruined me for life when I watch people now. And then the other one, I used to do stunts, and when I learned how to do like movie stunts and stuff like that, I can't watch action movies anymore without being like, oh, cool. Yeah. Harrison Ford, by the way, every movie he's ever done, he does what's called a stuntman punch. It's a punch with a bent elbow, which looks great on camera. Makes no sense in real life, but I swear I've never once seen a movie where he has not done this punch. It's the easiest one. But yeah, you just that stuff, you get it for life and it's stuck with you forever. So another big one, aside from the static stuff, the dynamic stuff that actually moves through a full range of motion is going to be the overhead squat assessment. So this is where we are paying attention to our 5 key kinetic chain checkpoints. That's going to be the foot and ankle complex, the knees, the hips, the low back, and the shoulders. So, and when I say, you know, shoulders and head, actually, we should separate those two. So what you're going to see here, this is a really great overhead squat, right? Her ankles are in alignment just the way we want them. She's got good dorsiflexion, right? Her knees aren't, well, I can't really tell right here, but I know that her knees are not caving in. Her pelvis is neutral. She's not anteriorly tilting. This is a good low back arch, right? It's not excessive and it's not lacking. Her arms are staying in line. So her shoulder complex is nice and loose and her head is nice and retracted. It's not dumping forward. Again, hips are in line with the knees, which are in line with the toes. Her knees are not caving in. If her feet are turning out and her knees are caving in or, right, that's part of that Pesplanus syndrome. So I'd mark it, right? I go back to my sheet and I would say the feet are turning out, right? I'd say the knees are caving in. if they are, right? Now, if my client is dumping their arms forward, like the rest of her squat's great, but her shoulder is so tight that it's having trouble staying up overhead, right? That is, yeah, that's an arms falling forward situation. So I'm gonna go back over here. I look at the shoulder. Are the arms falling forward? Yes, they are, right? She got an excessive low back arch. She got an excessive lean. Those each mean something different, right? So I'm gonna observe all those. I'm gonna write all those down. Now, the next assessment, let's say they do really well and you want to put a little bit more stress on the body to look for some more problems. Well, then the single leg squat assessment becomes a really valuable tool, right? This one is actually going to assess a little bit more about like ankle proprioception. So you're testing your client's balance, essentially. A little bit of core strength, balance, right? Joint stability, balance. So you're going to have them squat down on one leg here. Their hip, knee, and ankle should remain in alignment. But oftentimes what we'll see is the knee will hook in like this. So we look at the single leg squat assessment and it's like, did the knee cave in? Yes, it did. And it's going to mean exactly the same thing as it did up here when the knees caved in. It's not actually any different, but it's for people who like, wow, that was a really good squat. You know what? Let's give you the hard version and see how you do. We're not digging and digging and digging and digging until we find something wrong. That's not really what we're doing here. The reason we're going to give them a more advanced assessment if they did well is because like we're just looking to determine what exercises are going to be best for the client. You know, if they kill it on every assessment, you know what that means? Great. You just get to throw the hardest workout in the world at them. You don't have to worry about what to stretch, you know, like, but guaranteed you know, when you guys get, if you ever find that client, you let me know because I've never met them. So those are our posture assessments. And the last thing you're going to do where it gets really valuable, so you're going to go down to this bottom sheet here, and you're going to look to see what's tight and what's loose. You get your overactive muscles, you get your underactive muscles. If your client has the feet turning out, feet flattening thing, knees caving in, great. Tight calf muscles, right? Tight gastrocnemius, tight soleus, tight adductors, tight hips as well, right? These two are rotators, right? That's why the knees are caving in. These are why the ankle, the feet are flattening, right? You have your underactive muscles, your anterior and posterior tibialis, those are your shin muscles, right? And glutes. So this actually does all the work of the posture for you. Your client's low back arches, stretch out the hip flexors, stretch out the low back, stretch out the lats. Right? Strengthen the glutes, strengthen the hamstrings, strengthen the abdominals. So that's why we like posture assessment so much. It does the work of program design for us. You know, it tells me what to put in the warm-up. It tells me what to put in the workout. So we love fitness assessments. I know we talk about them every single module. We got an entire module dedicated to them. But it enables us to select the appropriate like flexibility warm-up stuff thanks to the posture. It gives us the proper cardio so we don't stress our client too much. Core strength, balance exercises, strength training exercises, obviously. All of that is going to have directly to do with what you assess in your client. Oh, I do want to save the changes actually. Any questions or comments today, guys? You guys all feeling good?
I'm good.
All right, guys. Well, let me kill the thing.